Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. I'm Jake, your bartender, and as always, I'm joined by Drew here on Center Stool. And Drew, we got a lot of NFL news today, a welcome gift for this time of the year. Before we move into free agency, which is coming up, we have a little bit more to talk about, and it starts today with Nick Foles, man. How are you excited about this guy finally free of the Philadelphia Eagles?
I can't blame him for not getting the franchise tag on him. Can you franchise tag a starting, or a starting backup?
Right.
And I don't blame him for not doing it. I still think that they're possibly in the fold of, trying to sign him. I really do. I think that they're going to try to give him a contract. Problem is, everyone out there is looking for that next big quarterback that no one has their franchise. He's going to get signed somewhere. So, yeah, it's
exciting, man.
It's unfortunate for the Eagles because they had a good 1-2 punch at quarterback.
Absolutely. Shay says Foles is going to the Cardinals. Matthew, good to see you as well. And he says he's in a great mood. I don't know if you're in a great mood because Foles isn't coming back or not, but to me, the most interesting thing is they're willing to give this guy $20 million. You're telling me 25 or 27 for the franchise tag, like that extra $5 to $7 million when you have almost $200 million to spend across your entire salary cap is the deal breaker?
Yes.
Really?
Absolutely it is. And it's not just that, it's using that tag. That tag could be utilized somewhere else. I mean, they got a lot of cap issues, and especially on that defense, trying to keep some of those guys there. You have your starting quarterback in Wentz, even regardless if he's healthy or not. That's
True.
your guy of the future. Foles is not. So it's just what it is. What's going on, Nathan? Thanks for the welcome back. Steve, what's going on, man?
Also, another point I want to make here is, do you think they should have gone for the sign and trade? Hit him with the franchise tag and move him somewhere else, because if I'm someone like Washington, or I'm someone like New York, or I'm someone like Jacksonville, wouldn't you like to see that one-year contract on this guy before you have to go and offer him that long mega deal? I mean, he's talked about hanging it up as well before in the past, Drew. I'm worried about this pick. If I'm gonna go into the offseason signing this guy, how are you gonna give him a 5-year contract for $80 million when you don't know what you're going to get?
The reason they didn't put that on him and have him sign it and try to move him is because that contract follows him. So that next team has to have an agreement with Foles to say, hey, you're not going to pay us $2 million and move on. Like, we're going to trade and you're going to sign you for that long term. So it does have a little bit more language into it, which makes that trade a little bit more difficult.
You do get to put your clauses in the contract. You get to sit there and choose your bonus structure and everything. But again, when you're talking about that surety, wouldn't you want one more year to see how he works in your system before you get that? I would. If I'm Jacksonville especially, I know we're talking about a lot of money and they're tight up on cap, but that's huge. I don't want to get in another Blake Bortles situation where I'm stuck paying this guy that can't produce, or he doesn't fit my system, or whatever. I mean, we've seen what he's done with the Eagles, but I want to see how he works in my system. I want to see how he works with my receivers, and I want to make sure that wasn't just Doug Peterson has a great offense, not Nick Foles is the best quarterback in the NFL, I don't know, man. I would definitely feel better for me if I could get him on that 1-year deal and then re-sign him after the fact.
It's so hard to say, man. I think the Eagles, they did what they have to do. I think they're still part of the discussion of trying to re-sign him to keep him as their backup. Unfortunately, I just think some other team's just going to outpay him. And Matthew, the Chiefs hoodie is back. It has returned. I know you guys are all excited. Sorry I couldn't be here for the last 2 shows, but I had to.
You enjoyed Florida, right?
I had to get some Florida sun, that's for sure.
Also, going back to the comments, Nathan says Foles to the Skins or Giants, and I was actually going to talk about this here in a second. You stole my point. I think those are the best 2 landing spots for him. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a sec. Going through the rest of these comments, Steve says he's waiting for his flight. Good luck at the airport, man. And Nathan says the Titans need a QB. Yes, we do, but we are not going to make a move for one of the most conservative franchises out there. You're going to see Mariota wearing 2-tone blue again here in Nashville. Also, Tony says that Foles is going to the Jaguars. That has been the rumor, but let's talk about that for a minute here. If you're Nick Foles, what is your ideal landing spot? Out of all these teams, any team in the NFL, where would you go?
Any team
Well,
in the NFL?
you know what I'm saying. Within reason. The Chiefs, right now. No, but...
to be honest, I think he just wants to be a starter. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't think he has a team that he favors necessarily. I mean, I'm sure inside the camp, his personal camp, they talk about it. He's got a team that he wants to go to. But I think everyone that's bringing up these teams, the Skins, the Jags, the Cardinals, I mean, if he can go and be a starter, that's where he wants to be. I think he's tired of being that backup role. He tasted that little run with the Eagles at the beginning in that starting role and was like, this is what I want to be, and then he became a backup. And then he's finally shined again. I think it's just wherever he can start is where he wants to be.
I agree with you, but if it's me, I'm going to sit there and try to make a push for the Giants. That's my number 1 landing spot because I get it. It's in division. You don't want to play these guys and that have practiced against you for years now.
He's not a starter there.
Oh, yeah, he is. Hands down, he is better at this point in his career than Eli Manning is. What I would do, though, if I'm Nick Foles, hear me out here, Drew. You already have Odell Beckham. You already have Sterling Shepard. You already have Evan Ingram. You've got 3 quality targets. You have Saquon Barkley that can run the ball. And what's more, I'm going to go to the GM and I'm going to say, look, you're going to sign me so you don't have to spend that number 6 pick on a quarterback. You're going to go draft me an offensive lineman in the first round. Get me the best tackle you can find. And then round 2, you're going to turn around and go draft a defensive lineman that can shore up that side of the ball as well. I think it's the best fit for the Giants. I think if they can find the cap to make this happen, there's no reason they should not go with Nick Foles and instead roll the dice with one of these young guys like Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins.
All right. I'm going to pump the brakes here. I am not an Eli Manning fan by any means of the way.
Drew loves Eli Manning like I love Joe Flacco.
I'm not even remotely an Eli Manning fan. I think the guy's a complete goof. But don't sleep on him. I mean, this guy can still ball. He can still play.
He's been sleeping on the Giants for years, Drew.
He needs an offensive line that can keep him upright. He needs time behind that pocket. Man, watch the offensive line play. They're not holding. They're literally just letting these guys run past him. He doesn't have time behind the pocket. He's got players, and his players keep getting hurt. Odell Beckham can't stay out there. He's always banged up. I mean, everyone wants to point fingers at Eli and say he's just given up on this organization. I don't see it. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP. He has brought this team from nothing to something, and you're going to sit there and just move on because Nick Foles becomes a free agent? I don't think so.
Eli quit years ago. No, that's all I'm saying. Eli quit on this team years ago. Look at the sacks where he's just going down in the backfield. He looks like a dead fish back there. He's not moving. Anyone gets close to him, the wind blows and he falls over.
The only reason he wants to go there is because when you look at the rest of the openings that's there, they have the best weapons. There's no doubt about it. But there's not a starting position there for him.
You do need to fix. First off, yes, there is. I think the Giants are done with Eli Manning. I'm not going to sit there and say they're going to bench him right away, especially if they draft a guy. You'll probably see Eli for a little while, and then they try to groom the guy behind him. But it's going to come down to the point where Eli's struggling because this team is not complete, and then we're going to see the young guy. Everyone's going to be calling for Eli's head, and then it'll be in there about halfway through the season, kind of like Manzell and Tyrod this year, where and that'll be the end of Eli's career.
Are you sure they're in love with any of these quarterbacks that come out in this draft that they make go, okay, that's the guy?
I think they have to. When you're pick 6 and you're ahead of all these other teams that need quarterbacks, you have to sit there and take the best guy off the board for a year, right? I mean, I think it's going to be Kyler Murray. I think that's going to be the big upset. It's going to be Kyler Murray coming off from everything I've been reading and everything. He looks like the closest to an elite quarterback. I think they're going to need a mobile guy with their bad offensive line. I think they're going to draft him instead of sign Nick Foles. But if I'm Nick Foles, I'm pushing for that Giant spot. And let's say I don't get it. Let's say you're right. They don't get it, and they don't get to rebuild that offensive line as well. Where am I going next? Washington. I get it. Everybody's hurt every year, which is the biggest negative for me. That's why I want the Giants first. But if you can get that offensive line healthy, and they can bring in a receiver or two for you, which the second round is going to be ripe for wide receivers this year in the draft, go grab one of those guys. Try to sit there and sign one of these free agents and then work from that position. I don't like the weapons they have, but I like the protection that offensive line is going to give a less mobile guy like Nick Foles. So when I look at this, I think those are the clear 1-2 spots. I don't want to go to Jacksonville. They can't protect a quarterback. They have receivers in and out. They don't really have any star wide receivers. The defense is up and down. There's cap problems. Everyone's sitting there saying Nick Foles to Jacksonville. I think that's one of the worst landing spots here. I might roll the dice with Miami first.
Thanks, Michael. I'm glad to be back. Steve says he has a job that he has to be at NASCAR races and it requires him to be there. Hey,
well, yeah, I was gonna say, let us know about it later, man.
That sounds awesome, man. It sounds like a great job.
You didn't have to flex on us like that.
I know. He's like, yeah, you guys are stuck behind a bar drinking beer talking about football. I get to actually go to the game.
Matthew also says the Giants O-line looked like the Minnesota Vikings O-line. Yeah, I mean, they've been bad, but they've been bad for years. It's one of those things where the Giants have been trying to fix it. They've been trying to bring guys. Solder was the latest kind of addition, and he played okay, but the rest of the line needed help, and for what you gave him money-wise, didn't live up to that. The Giants really just need to sit there and hit on a couple of these draft picks. They need a Quentin Nelson. They need a guy that can change the culture on that offensive line overnight and get better. Because if you're going to sign a guy like Nick Foles, you're going to have to protect him. He's not a run-for-your-life guy. He's a slide around a little bit and then make the throw.
Problem is there a Quentin Nelson player in this draft?
No, there's not.
That's where you're going to run into an issue. I honestly think, regardless of what they decide to do, they got to focus on that offensive line. And that's a number one priority. I know everyone's going to say go get a young quarterback, but I don't always see that being the best option. Steve says that Kyler is going to be a bust.
Too early to say that. Look, I don't like his size. I'm worried about his injury potential. He only played 1 year out there with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, but it was a pretty fantastic year, wasn't it? I mean, I've got the same criticism about Haskins. He only really played 1 year here. at Ohio State and look at the rest of these Ohio State quarterbacks that are absolutely fantastic in college, and then they move on, and it's mostly the system. You can tell when he doesn't have high talent guys, those Ohio State quarterbacks don't translate. As opposed to Oklahoma, we've seen guys like Baker Mayfield that have panned out. And I don't want to put too much on the college they go to, but it's a factor. You can't look at Ohio State and sit there and tell me they've had a great quarterback come out these past few years. Most of them wind up moving to wide receiver.
That's it. They all go wide receiver.
Also, Matthew says, have we seen that Manzell got kicked out? Yeah, we're going to talk about him. We've been talking about Nick Foles longer than I meant to, but we are going to talk about him in a minute. But let's move on, Drew. Let's talk about John Ross next, who is reportedly on the trading block for Cincinnati. Is it too early to give up on a 2-year pro? Yes. He's only played 16 games. It's too early to give up on him.
I gave up on him year 1, and you told me to pump the brakes. This is just the hype of being close to breaking that record or breaking that record. However you want to look at the videotape, you guys can make your own decision on if he broke the 40-yard dash record or not. But this guy was just a product of speed, and then when he got out there, he got hurt. He's just not where you want the 9th overall pick to be.
Right.
If you get picked that high, he needs it to be developing through numbers, not just speed, and he couldn't do it. Now, you can sit there and blame, well, he's overshadowed by A.J. Green when he's out there. Yeah, you can blame the injuries, but when he's out there, A.J. Green gets 80% of the throws. I mean, that does
We had 60 targets. I mean, I don't really want to sit there and say he hasn't had his chances. He had 60 targets and only 21 receptions, Drew. 1/3 of his targets turned into receptions. I mean, that's not the numbers you want to see, especially at a pick number 9, man. That, to me, is a huge bust. 210 yards, but he did get 7 touchdowns this year, which tells me there might be a little bit of growing potential. Now, the Bengals have come out and denied it. They said he's not on the trade block, but what that tells me is they talked to a team, and somebody leaked it like, hey, they were trying to trade us John Ross. And then the Bengals were like, no. When it didn't work out, the Bengals were like, we're not trying to trade him. So, to me, yes, they're absolutely trying to move on from him. Do I think it's too early? I think 2 years is a little bit better sample size. I like to see 3 before you make a move on a guy. But if you've practiced with this guy and you're like, this dude does not have it, I have no problem trying to move him out. A la Trent Richardson. I mean, that worked out for the Browns, right? They traded him right away. Everyone was sitting there saying, that's too soon. It's only 1 year. But then it turned out to be the right move. So I'm not going to sit there and say they can't trade him. I'd just like to see more out of John Ross. I'd like to see more games started before we're ready to give up on him.
Steve says John Ross is going to go to Buffalo. Man, is that who you want there?
I don't know. I mean, he's not on the field enough. They've got Robert Foster, who's another speed demon. Yeah. You'd be talking about 2 really good deep threats, but who's catching these underneath routes is what I want to know. It's not Kelvin Benjamin anymore. He wasn't catching them when he was there. But you can't go with just pure speed and hope to beat teams that way in the NFL.
I don't see that happening.
You never know. Maybe they trade a 5th or a 6th round pick, and they say we can grow a 1st round pick here in Buffalo.
I'd give him a 7th.
I'd give him a 5th. I'd give him a 5th round pick just for the speed alone to simply sit there and say, if I'm Buffalo, let me say that. I'm going to give him a 5th round pick because Josh Allen needs weapons. That's a pretty cheap weapon to bring in. Then you go and draft somebody as well. I think that's a pretty decent turnaround.
The only team, and I mean this, the only team I could see this guy going to and actually becoming something of a decent player in the NFL is the Patriots. Because Belichick seems to be able to get the best out of almost any player that comes into his organization. You know, the other one I could think of is the Saints. But besides that, I don't see this guy panning out. I think he's a bust. And I know, you're saying 2 years is just not enough time.
I like to say 3. We're getting there, Drew. We're getting there. I mean,
I just don't see. He can't stay healthy.
True.
And when he is, he doesn't seem to be making enough plays to make himself worth being out there.
Absolutely. No. Steve says Kelvin Benjamin couldn't catch a cold. You're right about that. I think Kelvin Benjamin would be good if he got out of the buffet line for once. But honestly, if he dropped 20 pounds, I think Kelvin Benjamin would be a pretty good receiver. The guy has first-round talent. We saw a pretty decent year or 2 out of him in Carolina back before Cam Newton had his MVP season. But you're right. I mean, these days you want to talk about guys that have given up. Kelvin Benjamin tops that list, I think. All right, Drew, let's move on, man. Let's talk about Mike Zimmer really quick. He got his contract option extended on to 2020. Is this the right move for the Vikings, bringing a guy like Zimmer back?
Yes.
I agree.
I love this move. I love this extension. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Even though they have not won enough to put them into the Super Bowl, that he has turned this organization around. He's created a great defense up there. Maybe they overspent a little bit on Cousins. Maybe they didn't. Who knows? That's still yet to be seen. But this was the right move, in my opinion.
Tyler says Buffalo is the Panthers North. Well, as a Titans fan who are the Patriots South, I know how that feels. It's always tough when you're copying another team's scheme and expecting to beat them. But I agree with you. The Buffalo Bills have kind of leaned on the Panthers with some of their personnel, some of their kind of mantra where we're going to run the ball and play nasty defense. It's a good comparison. Another thing I will say about Kelvin Benjamin before we move on from him, He could be good. He's got all the talent. He's got everything you want to see. He's got the size. He can create separation even for as big of a guy as he is. He can win jump balls. It's just the want is not there. He doesn't want to be an NFL player. He's not willing to put the time in the gym or even on the field in practice to make this, make his career. He wants to sit there and throw excuses like, oh, I was bad because of Cam Newton. I was bad because I was in Buffalo. Well, you just played for the Chiefs. I mean, now what's the excuse? Patrick Mahomes hasn't been good enough? I mean, the dude was the MVP.
Tyler says that John Ross he needs someone to get him the ball.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Andy Dalton is a mid-range guy. He's a mid-range guy. You can't. Well, hear me out.
He's the Red Rocket, bro.
Exactly. Hear me out though. He's a mid-range guy. There's half the teams that probably have worse quarterbacks than that. To me, that's not a good enough excuse of he needs somebody better than Andy Dalton. AJ Green has no problem with it. I mean, this year, Tyler Boyd didn't have any problem with it. Tyler Eifert has been a good receiver for them. I think John Ross, if he's going to go be successful, he needs multiple receivers that are big name in front of him, where everyone can forget about that speed, and then he goes and burns you for a couple plays a game. I don't see him being a number one receiver in the NFL.
No, I don't either.
Going back to Zimmer, it's the right move to bring back a coach that's had the kind of success he's had. I get it, the Vikings took a half step back here, but the roster's in place. The defense is still good. They still have a lot of players in that defense. You just need to have a larger sample size. That's why I like them taking the option and not having to worry about his contract coming up in 2019. The Vikings are still a team that can threaten for the playoffs. They were only a game or two out this year. Yep. I think it came down to a Week 17, if I remember right, for the Vikings, and they didn't quite get in. Bringing back a guy like Zimmer is an absolutely fantastic move, and it also kicks the can down the road to when you actually have to offer him another big deal. So that way, if things grenade after the 7-9 season, if things just fall apart for them, or 8-8 or whatever it was, forgive me, Vikings fans, if things just absolutely fall apart, you're still not married to him long term. This is the right move for them.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Moving on, let's talk about Johnny Manziel. Do we have any comments here, Drew?
Tyler said send John Ross to Denver with Flacco.
They'll take anything. I agree. They're kind of in the same scenario where they just need weapons.
I mean, they already kind of have a speedster, but I mean, they could use another one.
You can never have too much speed. You can never have too many weapons. I like the move pretty much anywhere for John Ross as long as you're not asking him to be that number one guy. I wouldn't want him to go to Miami where they need the number one guy. I wouldn't want him to go to, Buffalo where you need necessarily a number one guy unless you're going to bring another receiver in. Yeah. Like if you're going to draft a guy pretty high in the draft this year, then I'd say fine, he can go to Buffalo.
I just don't know what kind of market John Ross brings in. I get it, he was a number 9 pick. I get he's fast. But his sample size on the field is lacking. And what's someone willing to give up for the 9th overall pick of a wide receiver that isn't performing? I just don't know what kind of market's out there. So unless they're just trying to dump him, I don't know if he's going to be moving.
Absolutely. Steve also agrees with us. He says Zimmer's a very solid coach. True. I don't necessarily see him as the same kind of mastermind as guys like Bill Belichick or Andy Reid or any of these big name storied coaches in the NFL, but I think he's that tier right below them that if you put the right roster out there, you might be talking about a Super Bowl or two. I mean, and they're getting there. You look at this team; if they can fix that offensive line in Minnesota, they're gonna win a lot more games.
Yeah, if Cousins can figure out how to get the ball to arguably I think, the best tandem receiver group in the NFL.
Well, let me say this: I don't think it's necessarily a Cousins problem. You took a guy like Case Keenum, who's best at avoiding pressure. That's his scheme. You didn't protect him, but he made it work because he's good at getting away from pressure. Right. Kirk Cousins is a guy that needs to stand in the pocket and throw the ball. So when he's under pressure, he's not going to succeed. So if you can protect him, and I think that's going to be a big emphasis on this draft, if you can protect this dude, I think the Vikings are going to be back and they're going to be dangerous.
And I completely agree with you, and I get exactly what you're saying. Cousins is more of a pocket passer, and so is Case Keenum, but he's better avoiding the rush. I can completely agree with you, but when you look at the two comparison to quarterback, Cousins is an upgrade.
Yeah, I agree.
Keenum
I agree.
Almost brought him to the Super Bowl.
But we're talking about strengths here. Case Keenum's strength is getting away from the rush. What are the Vikings' weakness? The rush gets back there. So you need a guy that can do that if you're going to be successful.
As an NFL quarterback, you adapt your game to what's going on around you.
You don't get any faster, Drew. That's all I can say. You don't get any faster.
I don't want to compare.
Eli Manning should adjust his game.
There is no adjusting to that. He says hike, and that they're already on him. No, I agree with you. He need to adjust his game, and I'm agreeing with you that guy's not meant to do that. Eli Manning's not going to avoid pressure. He's going to get hurt, standing there and taking hits. He did what he could to stay healthy. And I just think when you look at the upgraded quarterback from Case Keenum, who in my opinion is a backup at best, and you put Cousins in there, who is a starter in the NFL, and they decline, I mean, there has to be something a little bit that Cousins could have done more.
I think it's game plan, like I said, or I think it's just a strength and weakness thing. Again, like I said, Case Keenum avoids the rush. When the rush is constantly back there, you're not going to take a guy that's immobile and just turn him into a rollout quarterback overnight where you can dodge all this
release the ball
pressure
faster. You do screen passes. You
and they could have adjusted. They could have adjusted a little bit, but on the other hand,
what's going on, man?
On the other hand, you can't always change everything. You have this idea of this is what's going to work. These are what my guys are good at. We need to try to do that. Sometimes you got to stick to game plan too. So
and of course, that's why they moved away from the offensive coordinator. He wasn't running the ball enough. Kirk Cousins was definitely struggling back there, but missing the playoffs after almost making the Super Bowl, not okay in Minnesota.
Now, Tyler also says he would take Zimmer in Carolina any day. You giving up on Riverboat Ron already? I mean, the guy's a gambler. Look, I don't know. I say already. He's been there a long time. Yeah. But I get what you're saying, Tyler. Maybe it's time for a change in Carolina, and that would kind of upgrade things. A good defensive guy like Zimmer might be what Carolina's been missing because their defense has been very up and down these past couple of years. When in years past, when they've been good, that's been the staple point. We play amazing defense. So maybe he gets that back on track. Also, Nathan says John Ross can stay away from Indianapolis, so there is a guy he doesn't want in Indy. Good to know. Also, Steve says, why be the next Andy or Bill when you can go create your own legacy? I'm not saying necessarily compare yourself to these two guys, but I see them as guys that they revolutionize the game because they think outside the box. They do things that other teams try to catch up to. I don't see Zimmer as that guy. Zimmer is not a guy that everyone's like, man, he just revolutionized defense. We've never seen anybody do anything like that. He's a very bread and butter guy. We'll do what's going to work, and we'll just do it better than everybody else. Whereas you talk about Bill Belichick, he reinvents the Patriots all the time. You talk about Andy Reid, he changes his offense up all the time. You got a guy like Patrick Mahomes, the offense looks like a college offense, and it's working. I mean, we're seeing shovel passes to tight ends. We're seeing end arounds. We're seeing everything else, and everybody's trying to copy that as well. That's why I'm saying I see him as a step below because we don't see Mike Zimmer doing the same things on defense. He's not reinventing the wheel, but he's a guy that has a pretty good wheel as it is.
I think he's good at grading talent. He's good at keeping players in the position they need to be. He does things well like that. And to have someone like that leading your team in the NFL is exactly what you want. And Jerry, thank you for always agreeing with me.
He agrees. That's just chief bias talking, Jerry. Come on. If he was wearing an Oakland sweatshirt, would you still agree with him?
Yes, he would.
I don't think so. Anyway, moving on. Just real quick. Nathan says there are decent wide receivers in the draft. Yes. The problem is there's no Julio Jones here. To me, there's no Julio Jones. There's no Corey Davis. If you listen to me, there's no guys.
Whatever that guy's done.
There are no guys, in my opinion, that are going to be the next home run player. There's a lot of good role players. There's a lot of guys that are going to be good number twos. There's going to be guys that maybe you're talking about like a bottom tier number one wide receiver. There's no home run for me. There's
I don't know.
Too many of these guys that are question marks for me.
I don't know if I can agree with that. I mean, if you go back and you look at an episode where we did a way too early
yeah, you had like 48 receivers at the top in the first round.
There's only 32 picks, man.
I know, but they somehow managed to squeeze them in.
I think I put like 4 or 5 receivers in that first round, and I know that's not where they're going to go, but it's a need of most of these teams in the NFL. They're all looking for these receivers. I think I completely agree with Nathan. Even though you don't see it now, I think there could be that Julio Jones. I think there could be that A.J. Green in here. They just haven't showed themselves yet. I mean, there's a lot of reason why a lot of these receivers drop down to later rounds and then develop later on in the NFL. I think it's very much a possibility, especially in today's NFL where passing is definitely first.
It definitely is first, but I don't know, Drew. When we saw Julio Jones coming out of college, when we saw A.J. Green coming out of college, we're like, this guy's going to be a beast. Same thing with guys like Calvin Johnson. I don't think there's that quality of a wide receiver in this. I see a lot of guys that are... I'm not going to say bust. I don't want to sit there and say they're bust because I think that we're going to get some quality guys out of this. We're going to get guys that were like, these are staple players for the next 10 years, but I don't see any one of them just, there's no Odell Beckham that just takes the reins and we're talking about them being the best receiver in football or arguably up there. We're talking about guys like Alshon Jeffrey where you're like, hey, he's good. But you're not talking about him being the best, right? No. So, I don't know, man. I worry about this draft going forward. Again, it's a bit of a crapshoot. There's nobody that I can sit there and say, I'm going to take a first-round pick on him, unless it's at the very bottom end of the first round.
Jerry, don't give Jake any love. Don't give Jake any love.
Finally, some wisdom from Jarrett. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Steve says the kid from UB will be solid. I'm not sure 100% who you're talking about.
I'd have to look at my draft papers. I don't. But there's so many players.
There's going to be a lot of wide receivers in this draft. Again, nobody's sure who's going to be the number one wide receiver. A lot of these guys, I've heard a lot of DK Metcalf out of Ole Miss. Yep. I've heard a lot of A.J. Brown because he's fast, whereas everyone else seems to be more of a possession guy in this draft. It's going to be interesting. That's all I can say. I can't wait to see how these guys rise and fall after the combine.
Yep.
All right, Drew, our final story before we move on to the draft, because, again, we've gone on a lot longer than I meant to. Johnny Manziel booted from Canada. Is this a surprise, or do you think he just wanted to play in the AAF and this is a good way to get out of his contract?
I don't know, man. I'm so tired of Manzell. I mean, talk about a
Manzell'd
guy.
out.
Talk about a guy that had the world handed to him, and he seems like he just can't keep his mouth shut. He can't just play ball. You know, I don't know, man. It sounds like that's what he did. It sounds like he's wanting to go play in the AAF. He's looking how well they're doing as far as people watching the games, because I sure haven't watched Canada League.
Well, yeah, I mean, when was the last time we watched Canadian football?
Yeah.
I mean, the rule changes and everything, not to mention just it being an international sport rather than a national sport with the AAF. The attention wasn't there, so maybe Johnny Manzell sitting there made a chess move. I know, we're talking about Johnny Manzell, but maybe he did, and he said, I'm going to go to the league that has the better viewership, the better attention. Did someone talk to
him while he was partying? He was like,
let me
decision.
stop real quick. Johnny Manziel's agent made a chess move here, and he said, let's try to get him back into the NFL. All right, Drew, we've got a draft grade from last year. We're going to start with the AFC West, and today we're going to begin with the Denver Broncos, your favorite team.
My favorite team.
It's Bradley Chubb, number 1 pick 5 in the draft. I had this guy going at number 2. I think Cleveland might have even taken him at number 1, to be honest with you, and then taken a quarterback at number 4 with those guys last time.
You were in love with him.
And I'm going to say he's a stud. 60 tackles isn't quite where you want to say. He was good on the edge, though.
In love.
12 sacks. Absolutely. I would love for him to be a Titan. And you know what? I'm so generous. We'll give you Mariota right now for him.
21 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. Started all 16 games. He's exactly what the Denver Broncos wanted. When they drafted him at number 5, they literally got one of the best players in this draft handed to him. This guy should have gone way before then. I completely agree with you. When you look at this pick, it's exactly what they need to do. You know, you got Von Miller on the other side, but he's a little bit on the end. He's going downhill. His uphill is gone. He's plateaued. Now he's going down. To bring in someone like this, especially when you're bust with Shane Ray, this is the biggest pick you could have done. I love this pick. I agree. I wish he could have gone to Kansas City. I'd have took him next to D Ford and Justin Houston, but that's not how it went. I love this pick.
Also, Steve says, off topic, is Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup? Yay or nay? I'm going to say nay for this reason. They're still kind of young. I like the Tavares signing. Absolutely fantastic. I thought he was going somewhere like Arizona or maybe even Nashville. Just someone that would have opened the wallet and threw all kinds of cash at him. But I think that the Maple Leafs are still a year or 2 away from it. I like the way they're playing, but hockey's a weird sport, man. You need a lot of puck luck if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. Yeah. I just don't think they're quite the best, especially when you talk about teams like Tampa Bay. I just don't see them winning the Stanley Cup this year, man. Maybe in a year or 2, but not quite now. Going back to football, though, Drew, I don't want to necessarily dwell on the Maple Leafs too long. We'll talk about them a little bit here in the summer months when we're talking about playoffs as well.
Right.
Cortland Sutton, 2nd-round pick. How do you feel about this guy? Because I was not very high on Cortland Sutton, but you're kind of talking me into it was just a rookie campaign.
It was a rookie campaign. You know, you're talking about a 2nd-round pick, 40 overall, and you sit there and you pick these number 1 or the 1st round out wide receivers. You're sitting there going, oh, this is a number 1 round. He did great. He did what he had to do. This guy had 42 receptions, over 700 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. Yeah, he only got about 50% of the balls that were targeted at him. That's not that great, but maybe that was more of a Case Keenum. Maybe that was the offensive line where Case Keenum had to rush the ball out of there. You know, that your boy avoiding pressure, couldn't get the ball to him.
Well, he was under pressure in Denver just like he was in Minnesota.
I'm not 100% in love with this pick, but it was the right move because when they moved on from Demaryius Thomas, they need another guy to come in next to Emmanuel Sanders, and I think he fit it perfectly well as a 2nd-round pick.
I absolutely agree now. I didn't like him before, but you talked me into it, Drew. It was a good pick. I'm not going to say it was a great pick. I don't see Cortland Sutton as a guy that has all the tools that's going to become a number 1 wide receiver, but he's a role player. He's a good number 2, and he's a guy that they leaned on when Emmanuel Sanders went out. So for a 2nd-round pick, that's pretty good.
And I think he's going to flourish behind Joe Flacco.
Absolutely. Jerry says the Broncos are his wife's team, so he's got to trash all their picks. Well, here's your chance.
Man,
it's hard to trash some of these guys the way they played.
I don't want to be in that household. That sounds terrible.
Pick 3, Royce Freeman at number 71, a running back that everyone thought was going to be the starter. All the preseason hype was there. They're like, this guy's going to take the role. He wound up being more of a backup to Phillip Lindsay, who we're going to talk about here in a minute. But that's not a bad thing, though, when you're talking about depth at running back.
No. He got a little banged up. He only got a little over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. It wasn't exactly what they were wanting, but when you pick up Phillip Lindsay, which we'll get to, that 1-2 punch, this was a great pickup because you need 2 good running backs in your backfield in the NFL today.
Absolutely, and we're also talking about Royce Freeman as well. When we talk about the injuries and everything, yeah, everybody gets banged up at running back, but we're talking about a team that wasn't able to run the ball with Denver for these past couple of years. To get a tandem and have some optimism going forward, I think it's great for whatever quarterback you have under center next year, whether it's Flacco, whether Case Keenum somehow survives this offseason and stays on that team. Getting a running game going in Denver with that defense, I think, can turn them back into a playoff team, regardless of who's under center. Moving on, though, they had a couple other picks. The biggest one for me, Josie Jewell, linebacker in the 4th round. That's basically a starting linebacker at this point. Absolutely fantastic year. He started in 9 games, played in 16 of them. Drew, getting a starting linebacker out of the 4th round. I know you don't like the Broncos, but you got to give them credit here, man. They killed it.
I do like the Iowa Hawkeyes, and you got another guy developing in that college program, going into the NFL and performing and doing well. I like this pick. I absolutely like this pick. He got 9 starts, and in my opinion, a pretty good linebacking core. I mean, this is a good defense. To get 9 starts, he did well. You know, he had 58 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflects. I mean, it isn't exactly the numbers that you want to see, but for that defense and a 4th round, you're absolutely right. It was a great pickup.
Now, moving on here really quick, we had a guy like Isaac Yandon. I'm going to actually moving backwards here. Cornerback in the 3rd round. He was kind of up and down. We didn't really see a lot out of him. I don't want to dwell on that pick too much because his cornerback is a growth position. We see those guys develop into good players.
Right.
So to put him in for, you know, even only 1 start this year, it's still kind of an optimism pick for me. They could do better, but things could get better with Yandon as well. They also drafted, again, Philip Lindsay, or they didn't draft him. They signed him out of free agency. Getting a guy like this, man, what a steal. Starting running back out of free agency where nobody picked him, and then he goes to a day 1 starter basically. I mean,
over 1,000 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns, made himself a target in the run or in the passing game. I love this. This is a great pickup for them. I mean, how did this guy not get asked to go to the combine? How did this guy not get drafted? When you show the talent on the field, and don't get me wrong, and Jerry, I'm right there with you, man. I am not a Broncos fan by any means, but when you look at this draft, you look at what they were trying to do, man. Minus a few late round picks, but that happens. This was a great draft by the Broncos. This is exactly what they wanted, and they did it. Yeah, their season didn't turn out that great, but I could point fingers at a lot of other reasons why they didn't go well.
And that's the fastest way to get back on track is you go and have a good draft class or 2, and then all of a sudden we're talking about the Broncos are back, man. Yeah. The Broncos are good again.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, exactly. I'm going back to Philip Lindsay just real quick. This was Saquon Barkley as an undrafted free agent. I mean, he put not the same level of production up there that Barkley did, but he got close enough that when you talk about the capital you had to spend on this is fantastic. Can you imagine the Giants if they would have signed Philip Lindsay or drafted him in the 7th round and then went with Bradley Chubb to edge rush? I mean, how much better would that team be? And that's why I say running back is a little bit more expendable in some of these other positions. You don't get outside linebackers that go put 12.5 sacks up out of undrafted free agency. It just doesn't happen.
No, you're right. And Jerry, I bet your house is a war zone when Denver plays Kansas City. I'll say this again. I know everyone's going to call me crazy. We did post awards of the season, and I said my rookie of the year it would be Philip Lindsay. And I know a lot of people were really scratching their head, like, how could you say that? You know, you got Baker Mayfield, you got Saquon Barkley. I say it because expectations. He's undrafted, and after I said that, his last few games were complete bust. But I think if he kept on going and kept running, he should have been in the talk. This guy outperformed everything that was asked upon him, and he, in my opinion, was the number 2 running back in the draft.
And you're talking about the last couple of games. I mean, that was after Emmanuel Sanders is gone. That was when Casey. Everybody knew nobody was playing for anything.
Right.
So I'm not even going to really hold that against him. I think this is the best pick for him, but we got to grade him here, Drew. And also, you guys in the comments, let us know, how do you think the Denver Broncos did in this draft? Give us your grades from as well. What is your grade for the Broncos, man?
As much as I hate this, and I hope that their draft this year is a complete F, I actually got to give it an A+. I think exactly what they were trying to do, they did. I would really kind of wish they would have focused. Well, I don't really wish it, but the team should have focused on the offensive line. I think all their plans for offensive line did not work out. Case Keenum, of course, I did not like that pickup. But when they drafted the players they wanted to, the positions they wanted to, I think they got home runs in almost every single pick.
I'm right there with you, man. I'm going to go A because they didn't quite hit on guys like Isaac Yandon as much. I don't think Cortland Sutton's necessarily a home run pick either. But they got good quality production. They got stars out of Bradley Chubb and Philip Lindsay. It's an A. I mean, you just one little step behind that A+. Let's talk Chargers next. I mean, we're going alphabetical here, so we'll go Chargers. Derwin James, safety, round 1, obviously pick 17. He was an all-pro. What can you say about this guy that hasn't already been sent? He's been one of the best defensive backs to come out of college in recent years.
Yeah, this guy was a complete stud. I mean, he's arguably he was Defensive Player of the Year for rookies. They thought about it, and when you look at him, That defense is so good. There's so many good playmakers on that Chargers defense, and to sit there and have a rookie safety, which I know you think that position sometimes is a position they have to grow into. This guy got on there, and he was a #1 starter right off the bat.
Safety's a little easier than corner to move into, at least at the NFL level. But I'll agree with you. Getting a day one starter, getting a guy that can step up and be an all-pro from day one.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. You don't come in and you're not an all-pro starter at safety in the NFL is what I was getting
Absolutely. At. I mean, you just don't see that. I mean, they've been missing a safety since Eric Weddle moved on as well. Going back to our comments really quick, Steve gives the Broncos an A+, and Jerry said just because he doesn't want to go against you, he's going to give the Broncos a B-. Look, Jerry, that was big of you. I appreciate that. I really do. That was big of you.
Trust me, it's hard to give an A+ too, man, but you can't deny it.
They did well. You trade your draft for theirs in a heartbeat. We'll talk about that in a minute.
But let's go back to James here real quick. You get 105 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3.5 sacks, 13 pass deflects, 6 quarterback hits. This guy was all over the field. He's doing everything you're asking him to do. He's creating turnovers. He's going in after the quarterback and getting to them. I mean, this is huge. That's what I'm saying is you might get a safety that comes out of the NFL and he might be able to stop the run really well, but he can't stop the pass. This guy comes in, he does everything well. That's what I'm saying.
And we were
this
shocked
is rare.
We were shocked in this. We had Derwin James somewhere around the 10th to 12th pick going in the draft. I mean, us sitting there saying he fell all the way to 17 at the Chargers. They did a good job of finding him. They did a good job of taking him. When safety historically is looked on in the NFL as a commodity, as something you don't need to have, but it's nice when you do. So for the Chargers to sit there and say this is worth a first-round pick, I mean, I think that was a great decision. You can't sit there and knock them for that at all because they could have taken a D tackle. They could have taken an offensive lineman. They didn't.
They didn't. And I don't want to slaughter your name, but Breham, he said he's a beast. He got hurt late in the year. I think you're talking about Philip Lindsay. You're absolutely right. If he didn't get hurt and he didn't really have kind of a down couple games, I mean, he is a beast. Like I said, I thought he was the rookie of the year if he didn't have that.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to pick number 2, Uchenna Nwosu, outside linebacker. Now, he didn't start a lot of games, but he was an absolutely fantastic rotational guy. He didn't get the talk because they had guys like Bosa and Ingram in front of him, but to get a guy like this in the second round that's going to come in and make great impact plays, he might have been one of their best edge defenders when it comes to run and pass. I mean, this is a fantastic pick for me, Drew. You can never have enough edge rushers.
Yeah, you're a little bit bigger on him than I am. Only because I saw more need somewhere else, but you're right. The rotation needs to be there at getting to the quarterback. But you know what I like about it? He had 3.5 sacks. He had 10 quarterback hits. He was not getting double teamed. He was taking that single team or that single one-on-one and beating him. I mean, you didn't have the numbers, but of course it's hard to get the numbers when you don't get the starts and the plays. But
Absolutely.
The fact is he was out there and he was making that happen on the limited time that he had. You're absolutely right. This was a great pickup by them.
Also, moving on to pick number 3, Justin Jones, defensive tackle. Now, he didn't start any games technically, in a position where they probably could have been a little bit stronger. It probably could have cut away from the run a little bit if they had a nose tackle that could actually step up here. He did have a good playoff game. He played well against the Ravens. He showed a little bit of flash. Out of a third-round pick, can you ask for anything else?
No, you really can't. And you also got to remember he played defensive end in college, and they moved him to defensive tackle. They asked him to put on a little bit of weight. They asked him to play a little bit of a different position. Maybe this next year he has a whole offseason of playing again at a different position. Maybe it'll be a little bit of development, but I agree. You kind of want to see a little bit more, but they must believe in him to give him 15 games of playtime. So, I mean.
Absolutely. Another couple picks they hit on. Kaiser White in the 4th round linebacker. He came in well for injuries. He only started and played in 3 games, but he played really well when he was in there. Also, Justin Jackson, a role player that really stepped up when we had Melvin Gordon get injured. Good pickup there in the 7th round, I think. And Mike Bagley, an undrafted kicker. He put 10 games on the board. I mean, it seems like he's kind of solved San Diego's kicking problems that have kept them out of the playoffs for years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for the Chiefs fans here, right?
It's all right.
All right, Drew, let's grade them, man. How would you give the Chargers in this 2018 draft? What kind of letter grade would you give them?
You got to give them a B+. When you pick up someone like Derwin James who can literally, like we said, day one, all-pro talent, you got to give this a high grade. I give it a B+. Again, I hope they don't have that many drafts like this in the future.
Absolutely. I got to go A-. I mean, I think they did absolutely fantastic. They got role players in the mid-rounds. They got starters in the top level. They got rotational D tackles. They got an all-pro. I mean, it's got to be an A for me. If you get an all-pro safety year one of a career or any position, if you get an all-pro, it's a good grade. That's all I can say. So I'm going to give it an A-, even though the rest of their draft was just as solid, I think, as the top end.
Yep. Steve's going to give him an LA-. Be a little
Fair
funny
enough.
there. And then Jerry's going to give him a B. I agree. I think this is all both of these teams had great drafts. I then again hope they don't repeat it this year.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about your Chiefs. I'm sure Jerry's been waiting on this. I hope Ryan moves in when we talk about the Raiders here really quick, but we're going to start with Kansas City. And Drew, it started with only a second-round pick. They obviously were not at the top of the draft. Pick 46 was their first pick.
Well, let's remember what they did with their first-round pick. They got
Patrick Mahomes,
the face of the NFL, a franchise quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes.
Move over, Tom Brady.
5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns. I mean, how can you not give this draft an A+? No, it wasn't. Okay, let's talk about
We're only talking about the draft. We're not talking about anything they used to acquire with any of these picks. We're only talking about the guys they actually drafted. It started with Breeland Speaks, an outside linebacker. 4 starts, 16 games, Drew. What can you tell me about him?
Not what we wanted. I mean, he played defensive end. He's kind of a heavier set guy, but in the Kansas City defense that they were running, he's going to be up on both his legs. He's not going to be down in the trenches. And unfortunately for him, he didn't really perform where we wanted him to. He only had 24 tackles, a sack and a half.
Could have had another one if he would have held on to Tom Brady, right?
That's something that will be stuck on him for a long, long time. You know, 8 quarterback hits. He had a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries. He was making plays, but it wasn't where you wanted him. And when you don't have a first-round pick and you take someone like this, you expect him a little bit more. I'd like to see him lose weight. I'd like to see him to get a little bit quicker off that edge. If he can do that, maybe it's time to get rid of Justin Houston because of that contract. But until that happens, we got to keep Justin Houston there. So unfortunately for me, the Breeland Speaks pick wasn't that great. I wasn't too high on it. But at the same time, he was usable in this defense.
Absolutely. I'm not going to sit there and say a second-round pick for what he gave you is a bust, but it's not a home run either. He's one of those guys that might be a developmental guy. Again, maybe he just didn't have enough chances. Maybe when you move on from Justin Houston, maybe if he takes D's Ford's spot, if somehow they don't manage to re-sign him next year, we're going to be talking about the Chiefs having a better outside linebacker than we are right now. It might just be down to playtime, but on top of it, not a great pick to this point. I can't sit there and tell the Chiefs they did a good job by taking this guy. Let's go round 3. Derek Nandy started off nose tackle. Now, nose tackle is a tough position to grade because they're not always on the field. But He started 11 games. He was in there for 16 of them. The best thing I can say about him, Drew, is he has room to improve.
Yeah, and you got to think about what the Chiefs were always playing. They were always playing almost with the lead in a lot of these games. So it was nickel and it was dime packages, so he didn't get to see a lot of time. So when you see that, 16 game, 11 starts, but only 35 tackles, it's because he wasn't out on the field. You're absolutely right. And he's getting overshadowed by Chris Jones and Bailey. So I like this pick. I actually do like this pick. And I know everyone's going to say no one can stop the run in the Kansas City. I don't really blame their defensive line. I blame their linebackers. So hopefully he can keep bulking up, learn how the NFL game works. But a third-round pick, I don't mind it at all.
Okay, another third-round pick, Dorian O'Daniel, another linebacker, played in 16 games, only started 1. He's really a spot contributor. For a third-round pick, I don't see that as a fault. But again, Kansas City had a lot of opportunity for these linebackers to shine, both with Breeland Speaks and with Dorian O'Daniel. They didn't have great linebacker play this year. Do you think he could have done more? Could he have shined a little bit better with as bad as linebacker plays we saw this Chiefs, or did he not get the opportunity he needed?
I agree. I mean, he needed to shine a little bit more. He did only get 1 start. He did play all 16 games, but he did, sometimes on special teams. Now, the talk out of the Kansas City camp is they're absolutely in love with O'Daniel. They love his personality. They love how he is in the locker room. He is a professional football player in the NFL, and they like what they got out of him. So when you look at these second and two third-round picks, yeah, they're not all-pro. They're not a starter like Derwin James. They're not killing it like Bradley Chubb. But when you don't have that first-round pick and you're kind of picking these positions where it's kind of these rotating positions,
right?
I don't hate it. It's not the most solid draft I've ever seen out of the Kansas City. But these picks right here, yeah, they could have been better, but I don't hate them either. I think where they really kind of hit was later on in the draft and undrafted free agent, and we'll get to him here in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a great pick they took was Armani Watts, a safety that if he would have stayed healthy, we might have been talking about the Chiefs having a little bit better defense because he looked okay for the 5 games he played in. And then you had the Eric Berry in and out pretty much all year long, or out most of the year, I should say. And then you had the struggles at safety and in the secondary. I think if this guy would have been healthy, we would have been talking about him much better, as a much better pick than we are right now. He got injured after only 5 games. I think going forward, he's going to be a guy to watch, though. I like what I saw out of the first couple games out of Armani Watts. Also, Tremon Smith, cornerback, absolutely fantastic returner. He played in 14 games this year, Drew. I would have liked to see him break in at cornerback. When we talk about the struggles that the Chiefs had defending the pass this year, especially when all the penalties were coming in, when they were playing musical chairs at cornerback, where they couldn't get that number 2 guy to step in, I would have liked to see this guy play more snaps in the actual defense. But you got an all-pro when it comes to return men out of a rookie class or a rookie team all-pro when it comes to return man. So you've got a quality guy in the 6th round.
He averaged 26.8 yards per return. That's good. And to be honest with you, maybe this draft, and I don't know this, maybe this draft pick was mostly to be a return man. They didn't really have anyone to kick off return anymore. So this guy, when they went out and drafted him, that's what he did. And he was there from... I remember him being there all 16 games. I only said he played 14, but I thought he played all 16. Maybe I don't remember correctly.
Now, Jerry says the Chiefs didn't have a solid draft, but they won the West, so he's fine with how they drafted. Well, Jerry, let me say this. If you want to keep winning the West, you want to win on these draft days. To me, that's what... It's not about this year. It's about 2 years from now, 3 years from now. These are the guys that are going to step into these roles when you're losing some of your starters. So when you're seeing drafts like this, and you see guys like the Broncos and the Chargers really just hit home runs with their draft, to me, it can shift a balance of power going forward unless you're very, very smart in free agency, which doesn't happen much in the NFL. So I get it. You can have a bad draft and you can survive as an elite team, but usually if you stack 2 or 3 or 4 of these drafts back to back, we're talking about your team starting to decline in a couple of years.
Ward, their undrafted cornerback out of Middle Tennessee State. I think you know that.
Absolutely. My alma mater, if you guys don't know, I went to MTSU too, so I'm glad to see him representing out there with also Richie James in San Fran. A couple big draft picks this year, Drew.
13 games, 2 starts, 30 tackles, 3 pass deflects. Those numbers don't shine and go, wow, this guy's going to be good.
Future Hall of Famer.
But he is going to be a solid a second or third corner that you need in the NFL. I love this pickup from them. I think it was absolutely the right move when they said, Orlando Scandrick,
Yep.
That's the name I was going for. When they're like, you can't play no more, you're not good, and they put him in, I think he played well. I think he did as best as you could. When you're constantly getting the ball thrown at you, just ask Steven Nelson, it's hard to put up great numbers.
I want to see a little bit better play out of him. I know I don't want to dog my boy because he went to my school too. I want to see a little bit better play out of him, but I think he'll grow into the position. I think the Chiefs got a rotational guy, if nothing else, a third, a fourth, a fifth corner, which in the NFL you can never have too many of. I still think they're going defensive back here in this draft. I think that's going to be the number 1 pick.
They need a number 1.
But we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. We're gonna review our mock drafts and put a few more out here going forward. Drew, we got to grade these guys. Steve's already got a C+ on the board with KC plus Chiefs. Look, I like the puns. Keep them coming, man. And he agrees with me.
Jerry also got to C+.
He agrees with me. I went C+ here too. You're a little bit higher though.
I am. I'm going to give him a B-. I think a lot of these positions weren't supposed to be starters. They're supposed to be backup roles. So they're not going to put up big numbers. They're not going to get all those starts. You get a return man that seems like he's going to make himself a name in the return game. And then you get Ward where he wasn't even in the draft. Yeah, it isn't where I want it, but I just can't give him a C. I think it's a little bit better than that. I'll give him a B-. I'm
going to give him slightly above average because they got a great return man in Tremon Smith. They got guys that are developmental players with Nandi and O'Daniel and Breland Speaks. But none of those guys stepped up into a role when they had the opportunity to, because those were weaknesses. They tried to address it in the draft, and they didn't. With the number of picks they had, if Breland Speaks would have come out and looked like Derwin James did, I'd be talking about this as an A+.
He needs to lose some weight
because they didn't have that deep of a draft. They didn't have as many picks as guys like as the Chargers did. But going forward, maybe some of these guys develop. We're talking about how good of a draft this is in a couple years.
Steve got them at a C+, saying that they're decent because they have plenty of room for development and improvement.
And when you have a good team, there's not always those opportunities at the beginning, but the defense for the Kansas City absolutely opened opportunities to these guys. They didn't step up. Year 2 might be a little bit different.
Yeah, it definitely need to give them another year.
Let's talk Raiders, man. Let's round it out here. Round 1 started with Colton Miller. A bit of a disappointment for me because I thought he was going to be good. Absolutely. I mean, the best thing I can say, he could improve. But he played in every game. He started every game from day 1 at left tackle for the Oakland Raiders. They moved Donald Penn, the veteran, to the right side to make room for this guy at left tackle. And we didn't see a great year. I'm not going to call him the worst tackle in football.
Nope.
But he's definitely got to grow if he's going to be a highlight left tackle for these Oakland Raiders for the next 10 years.
When you take that number one pick, their number 1 pick at number 15, you have to be a first-day starter. You have to play all 16 games. That's exactly what he did. Now, you can sit there and say, well, he didn't look that great at this game, or he did look great at this game. The whole fact is he stayed healthy. He played in that position. He didn't have to move to left to right, which is huge for a left tackle because there's a lot of development issues that come into that. So I like the fact that they put him there and they started with him. To be honest with you, that's one of their – even though it's a head-scratcher to me, I do like this pick. I wish he would have performed better for them, but I like the pick.
I'm not a big fan of it. I think they could have done better. But – they could have taken Derwin James, and then we'd be talking about him being a fantastic safety for the Oakland Raiders and a bright spot on this defense.
Right.
But they didn't. They took Colton Miller. They went offensive line. They drafted based on need, which historically does not work very well. I still don't hate the pick. He could grow into it. He's got a lot of development to do. But for left tackle, you got to do better. Derek Carr is a young quarterback that they've absolutely sabotaged these past couple of years. They've taken away his weapons. They've traded away guys like Amari Cooper. Their offensive line has taken a huge step back, and everyone's sitting there saying, he's not the same guy he used to be. Of course not. I mean, who would be after trading everyone away like that?
It'd be hard.
Also, let's move on to round number 2 here, Drew. P.J. Hall, defensive tackle. 14 games played in, 6 games started. Not exactly a fantastic player. There's a reason we're still talking about the Oakland Raiders needing defensive line help when they took 3 top 5 round picks this year. I'm not going to say he's a bust, but he's a rotational guy at best. You got to do better in the second round, right?
Nah, you'd think so. 22 tackles, 4 quarterback hits. Not really what you want to see out of a guy that's been in there for 14 games. And let's go on to the third round. We look at Brandon Parker, the offensive tackle out of North Carolina A&T. Started 12 games, played 15. When I look at these two guys, they're coming from both small colleges. They're coming from colleges that aren't playing your high talented, offensive line and defensive line players facing against you. Does that have something to do with their development? Does that have something to do with, hey, Gruden saw development in this guy, say, hey, these guys could do it. It's going to take them a couple of... You got to look at it.
If it does, you shouldn't have spent this pick on.
Parker wasn't meant to be the starter.
Right.
Donald Penn went down. He finally found time for him to be the starter. Well, unfortunately, they put him in the starter. P.J. Hall, yes, I agree. When you take some in the second round, he should be starting or getting close to it. He didn't really perform that well. But maybe give these guys another year when they're playing against talent like in the NFL, maybe they could develop into that position.
What I will say about P.J. Hall is maybe if you get a few other guys in this defensive line that can help influence the game, we're talking about better out of him because he is a D tackle. They're not always the most influential guy in the field. They're guys that can shine when you've got edge rushers, like maybe Rashawn Gary this year for Oakland. Maybe if they stack up this defensive line, we're talking about Oakland having good draft picks with these guys. But as for the offensive linemen, I want to see more. You got to protect Derek Carr. He's young. He's been not injury prone, but he's taken bad injuries because he's been hit too many times. And then you're going to go and struggle like this. I got to sit there and say, I don't really like any of these offensive tackles they took. You got to do better. I want to see more out of these guys, especially when you're getting this level of playing time.
I agree, but getting 16 games started all of them and played all of them.
It's important. I agree. It's important to be on the field, but it's important to play well when you're out there too. So, I don't know, Drew. We got to see better. The best draft pick for me, though, for Oakland is their other third-round pick, Arden Key, defensive end. He played in 16 games, started 10 of them. He was above expectations. For a third-round pick to come in and make influences like this, I think this is a guy that'll benefit if they can get a premier pass rusher out of this year's draft, especially at the top end. If they get another guy that can be great across from him, that can eat up those double teams, that can draw all the attention off him, we might be talking about this guy being a good number 2.
Yeah, no, and he did a little bit. He had 30 tackles, 1 sack, 11 quarterback hits. He was getting there. He did play all 16 games, like you said, and 10 starts. I mean, you can't be angry at this. Literally, their 4th pick in a 3rd round. I mean, that's pretty darn good for that.
Absolutely. Jerry said he thought the Raiders would be better than they were. Well, let me say this, Jerry. I didn't think they'd be as bad as they were. So I'm going to flip that a little bit. I thought they were going to struggle, especially when those trades came through. I'm like, oh, they're fucking... Oh. I didn't mean to say that. When those trades came through, I'm like, they're rebuilding. Game's over. They're cutting everybody. All right. Anyway.
If you looked at any of the preseason stuff last year, everyone put the Raiders at number 1. Everyone was saying it's going to be the Raiders or it's going to be the Chargers.
Well, I didn't.
And I sure didn't either. And a lot of people talked them up. And, I almost
bought the hype.
Bought the hype. I almost did it. But I didn't. Because I don't believe that the Chiefs are going to take that much of a step back when they lost Alex Smith. I didn't believe they were going to take that much of a step forward either. But I agree.
But you were pleasantly surprised.
I absolutely was.
Let's go on. Maurice Hurst, defensive tackle in the 5th round. 10 starts, 13 games. He's got a promising future. He had 4 sacks, 3 breakups at the defensive line as well. I think this is another good pick. But again, when you take guys like Hurst, you take Arden Key, you take P.J. Hall, and we're still talking about they need help on the defensive line, it's not good enough. That's all I can say. Moving on, they also took Johnny Townsend, a punter in the 5th round, which played pretty well. A good replacement for their other punter, whose name I'm drawing a blank on. Yeah, Marquise King. Yep. Good replacement there. And then they signed Daniel Carlson, a kicker from the Vikings who played in 10 games for them, did pretty well. They addressed special teams pretty well in this draft. So why don't we talk about their grade here? It's an interesting one for me. They geared up on special teams. They got some role players on the defensive line. They got a couple offensive tackles that maybe can grow into this role. Drew, what do you see this draft as?
I like where they focused. They focused on their offensive line. They focused on their defensive line and their special teams where they should have. I love everywhere where they were going. The problem is picks. They seem to mispick each one, maybe besides a few every now and then. I give it a C-.
I'm going to go C+. Again, maybe I'm being a little bit lenient here, but to me, the best picks were the kicker and punter. Special teams, everybody kind of overlooks until you don't have one of those guys, and then you're on red alert like the Chargers where they can't win these games because they couldn't kick a field goal. I think they did okay bringing in guys like this. I'm going to also look at these tackles and say they can grow. I'm going to look at these defensive players and say they can grow. Maybe they need some top-end talent to go next to them. And then we're going to be talking about the Raiders maybe having a good draft this year. But for now, I'm going to say just barely eking out above average. Like slightly above average.
Steve's got them at a D- at best. Hey, the only thing I can say is they got tons of cap room with about $70 million of cap room. They got tons of draft picks, especially in the first round with 3 of them. I mean...
Let me tell you what they don't have a ton of now. Stars.
Talent.
So they're going to need to have
stars.
a huge... Yeah. But they're going to need to have a huge draft this year if they're going to turn this franchise around. But they've got 4 picks in the top 36, I think.
Yeah, it's something like
4
that.
draft picks in the top 36. It's going to be on Gruden. It's going to be on Mike Mayock now, apparently. So not exactly my dream team when it comes to drafting guys, but...
Hey,
maybe they can. Yeah, maybe they can have a great draft.
Jerry has them at a D, so they're a little bit lower than we are. I think we're looking at. I told you, like I said,
we're looking at the sunny side, right?
Exactly. They drafted towards the positions of need. Yeah, maybe they didn't get it all where they were wanting it to be, but a C- for me.
Absolutely. All right, Drew. Let's move on to special thanks here. Who do we want to thank for being in the comments and making as good of points as they did? Because I think we had pretty good interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, one last comment said, Gruden will trade it all for Bortles.
You never know.
He'll lose his job right after that.
3 first-round picks and a second for Blake Bortles. Jacksonville would appreciate it. I wouldn't as a Titans fan, but Jacksonville would appreciate it.
Hey, guys, remember to please like, share, comment. We appreciate everything you guys do for us. We love talking sports with you. I'm glad to be back. My vacation was short-lived, but I missed being on this show. It was great, but special thanks out there to Matthew, Shea, Nathan, Steve, Tony, Michael, Tyler, Shannon, Jerry, and Briam. Man, you
Abraham is what you're looking for. I wasn't going to correct you before, but I will now. Anyway,
it starts with an I.
I know.
It confuses
I know.
me. Anyways, man, thank you guys so much for all your comments and your likes, your shares. We appreciate everything. We love talking sports with you.
Absolutely, guys. It's always better with your interaction. I appreciate your draft grades, too. I don't think we're too far off. I think there's some good agreement here today.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, we will be back on Friday to talk about the AFC South, our final division for the 2018 draft, as well as whatever else comes up in sports. So for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jake, your bartender. This is Drew, who's back from vacation now, and we will see you guys on Friday.
See ya.